Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who is joining me online for this Dyscalculia Workshop. So if you're watching this recording, I would recommend that you watch it with a partner, a colleague, friend, or someone, anybody that is going to give you somewhere to spark ideas off, because you get more out of this session if you're not doing it alone. So I want to begin by asking you to use your imagination. So imagine you are a child, you get up, you're up early, you're going to take the bus to school. Now imagine you're all organized, you go out the door and the bus is late. You get onto the bus. Now imagine you're sitting there and you're checking your phone or you're checking your watch. And actually, a lot of dyscalculic and dyslexics or anybody neurodiverse, frequently they don't wear watches either. And so sometimes they have no idea how much time is passing, but they are aware that the bus is late. And so but they aren't aware how late they're going to be from school. So that in itself, pardon me, causes anxiety. Now, imagine you arrive to school, the yard is empty. You go in the school door and you see the receptionist and she says you're late, something you already knew. And so your anxiety rises even more. Now, imagine you walk into the classroom and imagine that everybody in the classroom turns their heads to look at you. And imagine the teacher then turns and you can tell that she's cross. And she says, "Why are you late?" Now, a number of things pop into your head. So sometimes if you're neurodiverse, particularly dyslexic or dyspraxic, pardon me, I'm just going to switch my phone on silent, you don't have a picture for the word why. So one, you mightn't have a clear understanding of why the question is. To you, you might just understand you're late. You're thinking, I know I'm late. Anyway, she tells you to go sit down. You sit down, and by this time, like it could be only about 20 past 9 in the morning. You're really warm from running. You've run from the bus. The bus has been late. You're all sweaty. You sit down, and she's going, hurry up, get your books out of your bag. Now, imagine that you also are dyspraxic. So for the dyspraxic child, trying to undo the zip of your bag, that's going to be more difficult. Trying to find your book in your bag is also going to be difficult. Because the reason I'm saying imagine you're dyspraxic is quite frequently when my students come to me, they don't just have one diagnosis, they have multiple. So the dyslexic child might also have issues with maths, or the dyspraxic child might have issues with maths, or they might have issues with reading. So nobody fits neatly into one little box. So, I mean, we all have different things and different skills that we're good at and other things that we're not so good at. And so frequently, I think people mistakenly think that there's the dyslexic child, there's the dyspraxic child, there's the ADHD child, and that these exist in isolation. And that is not my experience over the last 20 years of working with neurodiverse children and adults. Very few fit into neat little boxes. We're all very different and we all have different things that we're good at and other things because of the way education is set up we're not so good at. Anyway, so you're there with your back to your imagination. You can close your eyes because it will give you a more visual picture. So at this stage, you're making kind of a lot of noise as well. And then the teacher complains about the noise and you've started to feel uncomfortable. Your clothes feel scratchy because you don't really enjoy wearing them. And imagine you eventually get the book out of the bag anyway. And the teacher says, turn to page 27. If you're dyscalculic, that probably doesn't mean anything to you. So you might not have a connection between how she says 27 with the numbers 2 and 7 on the page. So you're flicking through the book, and then you see the girl beside you and you go, okay, I'm on the same page as her. So you kind of breathe a sigh of relief for a few minutes. But what had happened? The teacher has now moved on. So she's no longer either on page 27 or she's very far down the page. So you have no idea what's going on at all in the class. I'm just scooting through my notes here. So this is the reality of your son or daughter, or your pupil if you're a teacher listening to this, or it may be grandparents, because I've quite a lot of grandparents who bring their grandchildren to me because they a lot of time are spending a lot of time with them. So this is the reality of a neurodiverse child. And this is only maybe 9:30 in the morning. Already they've experienced the bus being late. They don't have a good concept of time. So for them, it could have felt like a really long time or could have felt like a really short time. So time kind of goes at their internal pace, which can be slower or faster. Then they got really sweaty, which most kids don't enjoy either because they had to run from the bus to the door. Then they internalized the feelings of the teacher and the class as the class looked at them and probably sniggered and laughed as well. And all of these go to increase their anxiety levels because for them, life is a lot more confusing because that's not the way that they process information. So everything that's been delivered to them before they get to school is verbal. So the teacher has spoken to them, the receptionist has spoken to them, bus driver has spoken to them, and it's only 9:30 in the morning. And already they're at a very high level of confusion. So this is what I'd like you to do now. I'd like you to step into that world. Imagine you are that child. Imagine you're about 8 years old. How would you feel at 9:30 in the morning, having gone through all that? So I want you to try and write down at least 5 words that describe how you feel. If you're more of a picture thinking person, you can just draw pictures or doodles. And if you are more of a kinesthetic and feeling person, you can just close your eyes and think how it feels. So this is what I want you to do while you're using your imagination. Think about what's going on in their heads. What can you hear? So what can you hear when you're on the bus? What can you hear when you're in the classroom? What can you smell? From my experience, schools have a distinctive smell. And what can you see when you look around? So this is all based in your imagination. So close your eyes, take yourself to on that journey from school, from the bus to the school, and think about what you hear, what you see, what you smell. And why do I say that? Because our thoughts are influenced by our senses. We take in information through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, obviously, through our skin, through our emotions. So if you're watching this with someone else, I'd encourage you to take a couple of minutes. So take 5 minutes. Each of you write down your own thoughts and your own feelings, and then have a discussion about this. So I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes intentionally so that you can process what I've asked you to do. And then I will continue. So I'll stop for a couple of minutes, but in reality, it will probably take you at least 5 minutes at home to come up with these ideas. Remember, it's not a race. It's you trying to get into the state of mind of what the child feels like. And they've been doing that their whole life. So 5 or 10 minutes is probably not ample time, probably a good amount of time for you to get into their world. So, okay, you go ahead and do that, and I will check my notes. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but it's actually quite difficult to do nothing in silence. It kind of takes you back to classroom situations where teachers ask for silence and you're trying to do something and maybe silence doesn't work for you. So for some children, they find the silence when they're, you know, I don't know, doing a test, or if the teacher says do some of these questions and I don't want any noise. The lack of noise sometimes is less helpful and creates more anxiety. Anyway, so the next thing I would like you to consider, and this time I'm going to pause the video for 2 minutes so you can think about it. What impact do you think these feelings have on your child's mental health? And I know what impact they have because after 20 years of dealing with children, I can tell you it's not very positive. But I'd like you to write down, what impact do you think these feelings have on your child's mental health? So write down whatever thoughts. So when I say children, if you're an SNA or a teacher, you can think about all of your students or some specific students that you can think about and ask yourself, okay, so what effect does this confusion that they experience very early in the morning create on their mental health? So I will pause the video for 2 minutes. And like I said, at home, you can. Okay, so hopefully you had enough time there to write down how you thought those feelings were going to affect your child's mental health. So the next question I have for you is, how does that make you feel as a parent? I mean, as a parent of a dyslexic child and as the wife of a dyslexic husband, um, I know how I felt when my child was or is, he's still dyslexic. He's 32. But when he was first diagnosed, to me it was a relief. It probably wasn't as much a relief to him, apologies, to him. But to parents, well, I think it finally gave me the answers that I was looking for. So I knew when he was 5 that he was dyslexic. He didn't get a formal diagnosis till he was 8, even though I had paid privately for a couple of assessments. They don't like to give diagnosis early, um, which is crazy in my opinion. But anyway, um, because if I, as a lay person, just from my research, knew when he was 5, then they also knew when he was 5. So how does that make you feel as a parent? I mean, does it make you feel frustrated? Does it make you upset? I think for parents, mainly it makes them first frustrated, but secondly, they know their child is clever. So it's kind of you get filled with sadness, I believe. So you can take a moment to think about that and write down how you feel. So it's important, these exercises are really just a way of finding out how you're feeling, how your child is feeling, and putting yourself into the situation of a child. And if you're a teacher, obviously it's super helpful to understand how your the children in your class are feeling, and sometimes it explains some of the behavior. Or if you can't understand why, when you've explained something 50 times, they still don't know it. I'll be sharing the reasons for that now in a few minutes for you. Okay, so the next task is, what if your child had a solution, one that worked and that you could understand? How would that feel? So how would it feel if they didn't have to struggle anymore? So take a few minutes to think about that as well. So you can pause the video yourself. I will continue to talk, but do pause it if you're alone or if you're with someone else, and have a chat about how would it feel if they didn't have to struggle. So now let's begin. So why did I ask you to do all that? Because without understanding, you cannot move to knowledge or wisdom. So if you don't understand what the problem is, you can't build knowledge. For example, if you don't understand the logic of how to cycle a bike, that involves like balance and coordination, you won't learn to cycle the bike. But similarly, you won't learn to cycle the bike by just looking at the bike. So you might understand how to cycle it, but unless you have the correct tools, which are coordination, balance, and being able to focus on going on a specific direction. So I have a couple of students who are both dyscalculic and dyspraxic. And for them, things like cycling a bike, jumping, running, um, they all posed many problems. But after working with me, the transformation was phenomenal. It's because they understood how to do these things, but they didn't have the tools. They didn't have the tools to learn how to balance. They didn't have the tools of good coordination. Therefore, they couldn't learn to cycle the bike. So that's knowledge. Wisdom comes when they're so good at cycling the bike, they could explain it to somebody else. So what is dyscalculia? I mean, I know what it is, but I thought I would look up one of the dictionaries, and this is one of the dictionary definitions. Dyscalculia is defined as impairment of mathematical ability due to an organic condition of the brain. Who even knows what that means? So this is the definition that we work with. It's a difficulty performing aspects of arithmetic or maths. Now, sometimes there's another label used, and that's acalculia. So in acalculia, they can't perform maths at all. Now, sometimes there's other reasons why children are not performing well in school in the area of maths. So I had one child about 10 years ago who'd been in one school, and then the family, they'd separated, and they moved house and therefore moved school. The child went from being near the top of the class to nearly the bottom of the class. So he came to me and we did a maths program. We did the same maths program I would do with my dyslexic or dyscalculic students, because he was missing some of the building blocks, some of the concepts. And so no matter how good you are at maths, if you miss chunks of maths, then you fall behind because the class has moved on. And maths is very much about building blocks. If you don't have a strong foundation, okay, so you might be like very good at school, you might be good at maths, but if for a whole year you're upset in school and you're not paying attention and there's been a lot of upheaval, or you've been ill. So I had another child who was very ill, and he missed a lot of school. He went from being in resource to doing honours maths up until leaving cert level. So there's lots of different ways, or lots of different reasons, I should say, that children don't perform well in school in maths. These are the things that I know for certain. So for certain, the main cause of not performing well in maths in school is the children don't know how to focus. And that lack of an innate ability to focus creates a lot of confusion. Confusion about numbers, confusion about concepts, confusion about the building blocks of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Confusion about concepts. So what are the concepts? So the concepts that we work with are self, change, consequence, sequence, order and disorder, time, money. And now, obviously, that all leads into other things like fractions and decimals, but the concepts are critical, and I will explain a little bit about them in a few minutes. So let's examine the two main ways that people access information from maths. So they either use a verbal way of learning or a non-verbal way of learning. So to go back to the very basics, so think about counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we call, when you see a number 1 written down, we refer to that as number 1. In actual fact, the number 1 represents the numeral, or is the numeral, sorry. and it represents an amount. For example, I have one clay ball that somebody's poked lots of holes in. Okay, so the amount I have is one, or the number of balls in my house is one. But how is that represented in a numerical way? It's represented by the written numeral one. But nowadays, those two words are interchanged a lot. For example, a long time ago, I lived in a house at number 27. So we always say number 27. In fact, 27 was the numeral. The number of my house was one because I only had one house. I didn't have 27 houses. So for most of mathematics, we are trying to determine quantity. And to determine the quantity, we use 1, 2, 3, 4. We count. So if you think about it's all just the end of autumn now, and I have lots of pine trees in my garden, and pine cones keep falling, leaves keep falling. So if I go out and 3 pine cones fall on the ground, now most children will see 3 pine cones. It's a physical, tangible object and go, oh, 3 pine cones. If, on the other hand, loads of leaves fall on the ground, there's a big, huge bunch, it's not so easy to see how many is there in a visual way. So let's look at the difference between picture thinking and word thinking. So picture thinking, we go back to a visual example. If I had a jar of cookies, and the jar of cookies had 12 in it, and there was 4 children, and we had to decide how many cookies each child would get. Well, the word thinker uses reasoning and thinks, okay, so that's 12 divided by 4. So each person gets 3. The picture thinker, the dyslexic or the dyscalculic thinker, they go, okay, so if 12 cookies, 4 people, so they'll have one, they'll have one, they'll have one. And once everyone has one, then they take a second one and then they get a third one. So then for them, it's like a comic strip. And in the comic strip, each person is taking a cookie from the jar and they're alternating between the 4 until eventually all the cookies are gone and they each have 3 cookies. Now, this, my husband calls it like a movie screen. This movie screen goes very fast. So the child isn't even aware really what they're doing. They only know they went from 12, they know the answer is 3. They say really quickly, 3. And then the teacher goes, how did you get there? The word thinking child will go, well, I divided 12 by 4 and I got 3. The picture thinking child won't really know. They won't be able to verbalize how they got to that answer, but they will have the answer. For years ago, I remember when my son was very young, he was in the back of the car. His sister was a bit older. She must have been she was either in junior or senior infants. So he was either 3 or 4. She was calling out a question, and straight away he said the answer. And I was going, wow, how did you get that? I had no clue. He'd never even done a maths question in his life. But he had done it because he was listening to a story. And in the story, he was visualizing, the actions. And like his sister's going, that's not right, that's not right. And then she checked, it was right. Now, the difficulty with that is sometimes when they go to school, some of those natural talents over the years, they become a little bit dull. And so I'll talk about that a little bit later. So for most maths, especially more complicated maths, children have to understand a sequence. But to understand a sequence, they have to also first understand that every maths involves you. So that's why we start with the concept of self. Self does all the learning. Self does all the calculating. If you're dyslexic, self does all the reading. So self does everything. So you have to have a good sense of your own identity. And sometimes that's very lacking in children. Their identity is made up of, I suppose, other people's thoughts and opinions rather than what in actual fact they are all about. Anyway, after that, the next concept that's critical in maths is understanding change. For example, something simple like I had 2 balls. I added 3 more. How many did I have? So the answer is 5. Now, when we have concrete amounts like this, most children can do it. Most of the confusion arises when we take away concrete objects and then they have to think like abstractly. And what happens then? One, most people don't have an understanding of what the equal sign means. So equals means the same amount on each side. For most children, they just write that down. They think, oh yeah, the answer goes there. They've no idea if they count the numbers on each side, if they didn't balance, then the sum's wrong. That there has to be, if I have two here, and I have 3 more beside it, I can just physically count them. 1, 2, and I add my 3 and I get 5 equals 5. So 5 equals 5. I mean, that's pretty simple. But for very many children, that isn't simple because there is no picture there. There's just the numerals like I talked about earlier. Now, another thing that causes a lot of confusion for children is the plus sign. They have no idea what the plus sign means. So the plus sign just means, or the addition sign, whatever word you're using, just means to join something to something else so there's more. So this is one of the things that we do during the maths program. We clear up all these confusions with symbols, with numerals. So we clear up the idea that, okay, I had 2, I joined another amount to it, and how many did I have then? The word how many, that can also cause confusion because they might not have a picture for how or many. So there are other things that we resolve during the program is the idea of what words mean. And sometimes they mean something different in a maths question than they do if it's written in a story in English. So that again is a area of confusion for children. So once we have looked at self and change, because what changed? 2 changed to 5. What made it change? We added 3, so that's consequence. So what made 2 become 5? The adding of 3 more clay balls. The next concept that we look at is sequence. Why? Because all maths questions are a sequence. Even that basic one of 2 plus 3 equals 5, that's a sequence. It has to go in a specific direction. Now, in addition, if we go the other way, we'll still get the same answer. If, however, we are doing a subtraction sum and we have an understood sequence and we started off with 3 and then we told the child to take away 2, the answer would be 1. But if the child doesn't understand that you go from left to right, they might start on the other side and they'll have 1 equals 2 minus 3, and they're going that way into infinity. So sequence is critical. For some children, they can master the basics, so they might have been okay with addition and subtraction. But then when they get to multiplication and long multiplication, they're very, very long sequences. If you're a word thinker, you can remember these sequences. If you're a visual thinker, unless you've been taught in a visual way, using real quantities, using concrete materials, these steps mean nothing to you. So frequently you'll see kids really struggle with long multiplication and long division because they have no understanding of the steps involved in the equation. For example, most children don't understand that division means to separate things into groups. And what do I mean by that? Okay, so if I get 2, 4, 6. So if I have 6 clay balls, now in school you won't have clay balls. That's the difference. But so if I have the number 6 and I'm going to divide it by 2. So most children don't know that all that question means is how many groups of 2 is there in 6? There's 1, 2, 3. So when it's presented in a visual way, the child can easily relate, okay, so here's 2. How many more 2s is there? There's 1, 2, 3. So again, division means to separate into groups. And for many people, that is a revelation. Now, obviously, when you get into bigger quantities, you can't be carting around hundreds and hundreds of clay balls. That's why it's very important that they understand the basics at the beginning. So when I'm working with the child, we go through a series of 15 maths exercises. Then we master the concepts that I'm talking about. And then we move on to word problems. And then we move on to maths with pencil and paper, because obviously that is our end point. That's what we want to get to. But to get to that, the children have to learn the concepts in a visual way that works for them. So once they've learned it in a visual way, they can work with the written content because they understand what a division sign means. They understand that it means to separate into groups. They understand what the addition and subtraction sign means. They understand what the multiplication sign means to add the same amount and number of times. So if I had 2 times 2 multiplied by 4, what does that mean? It means I'm going to have 4 groups of 2. So we're going to have 2 and another 2 and another 2 and another 2. So we're going to have 4 groups of 2, which is 8. But it's very easy to see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 groups of 2, which means the answer will be 8 or will be equal to 8. Once we've looked at sequence, what are the other concepts that a lot of children really struggle with? Order and disorder. And I'm sure a lot of you will understand this when you look at their bedrooms. So some of my students are very tidy. The vast majority of them are not. And why? Because they struggle to understand the concept of order. What does order mean? It means things in the right place, things in the right position, things in the right condition. And if you're going to help a child create order, so this is something that I do, a service I offer all of my students, and it's part of the maths program, is establishing order. So first of all, we establish order with the jigsaw. We establish order on my desk. So what do we look at? We look at, okay, what shouldn't be there? So what's in the wrong place? What's in the right place, like on my desk, but in the wrong position? And what stuff is in the wrong condition? So what stuff needs to go in the bin? Or what stuff's worn out? Or what do I not use anymore? So condition could be, it's for the bin. It could be, it's no longer useful to me, but could be useful to somebody else. So you can donate it to charity, or you can sell it online, or it belongs to someone else. So you're going to return it to that person. So that would be the first of the 3 things we look at, the condition. So what condition is the thing in? Do I need it anymore? Does it belong in the bin, or is it useful to somebody else? Then we look at what's in the wrong place. So what shouldn't be on my table at all. And then finally, when we've done that, we look at what is in the wrong position on my table. So what should be somewhere else on the table? And so I shift the power from me to the child, because that's the whole idea of all of the work that I do, is helping the child discover their own identity, equipping them with tools, and with that tools, empowering them to make decisions themselves. And why is that important in maths? Maths have to be done in a certain order. But if you don't understand how the concept of order works, it's very hard to do it in a maths question. Another concept we look at is time. So, like I said, people experience time in different ways. For some people, it speeds up or slows down. Most of them don't know how clock works. They don't know where time came from. So we, start with the understanding of time and how a clock works and why it works. And then other things that we look at are obviously fractions and decimals and place value. For a lot of children, place value is very complicated, because why is it so complicated? They don't understand the function of the decimal point, because they see units, hundreds, tens, thousands. And on the other side, it's hundredths, thousandths. So they sound similar. And because they don't work well with the sounds of words, because they're more picture thinking, these words, they can't differentiate the difference between one and another. So that's why we do that. What is the ultimate result of all these things? So, as you can imagine, life in general can be very stressful. If you don't understand a clock, if you don't understand change, consequence, then you don't understand a lot of life concepts either. So you don't understand how they operate in a classroom or in the home. And so children end up very frustrated, very unhappy, because and a lot of them are missing the building blocks. And if you're missing the building blocks, like the basics, then it's very hard to, function, either in school or at home. And you end up with a lot of frustration. And I mean, a lot of parents say to me, oh, he's very well behaved in school, or she's very well behaved in school. But when she comes home, she is an absolute, or he is an absolute nightmare. I'm just moving my notes over. So what I want to do is give you a couple of tools you can use. So the first thing are these balls that I use in my practice, and I have done for 20 years. They're a super way of helping children get focused. We call them couche balls. Now, if you're based in Ireland, you can get them from, gosh, what's the name of the lady? I had it a minute ago. I will send the information with the video of where to buy them. Basically, what you do is you stand on one leg and you toss. I always start with one couche ball. So stand on two legs first. Throw the couche ball back and forwards to each other. And then when the child is, because not all children are good at catching balls. And the beauty about these is they kind of collapse when you grasp them. So, I mean, they're good for their muscles as well. Stand on one leg, throw the couche ball back and forward. When you've mastered that, move to two couche balls. Now you have to throw them like this with an underarm throw. If anybody wants a video demonstration of how to do that, please ask me. You throw it back and forth to each other. And I always, like, if they can get to 5, and then gradually build up from there. I mean, some of my students can do like hundreds at this stage, but it really, really reinforces their focusing, because there's a big connection between your balance coordination and your ability to focus. It trains the brain to know what it feels like to be focused. It actually opens new pathways in your brain. Your brain is full of neural pathways, along which electricity flows. And when you do something new that you haven't done before, you open new neural pathways, and it makes a super addition to your skills, either as a teacher or as a parent. The next thing I want to teach you is box breathing. So box breathing involves you breathe in. So start off by breathing in for 4, hold your breath for 4, breathe out for 4. And if you practice that every day, it makes an enormous difference because when you're breathing well, your anxiety levels drop. So when an awful lot of my students, talk about anxiety. Now, we all have anxiety, and anxiety has a place. It's a warning sign to our bodies that, you know, something about the situation either doesn't feel safe or feels very uncomfortable. And I suppose we all have to get used to being uncomfortable. And sometimes when you're uncomfortable, you know, it's a good thing. You know, you can't live without learning to be uncomfortable. So what to do is you can breathe in and encourage them to blow the air out and breathe in and really deep breaths. Because I always tell them, if you only breathe shallowly, here you go, that's not a deep breath. That's not doing anything. But the shallower you're breathing, the higher your anxiety levels go. So the more you practice breathing, the easier it is to control your anxiety levels, the easier it is to relax. And when they get good at it, they don't need to make any sound. If they feel in school their anxiety rising, they can just sit there and close their eyes for a second and breathe in and breathe out. Now, you might want to tell the teacher that you are teaching them this so that she doesn't think they're going asleep. One of my daughter's teachers actually had a wonderful idea. She gave my daughter a laminated gold star, and she used to keep it in her pencil case. And if things were getting too stressful, the teacher said, just put it on the table. I'll know that you need to go out for a few minutes. But she wouldn't just let her go out and wander around. She'd say, okay, can you go to the office and blah, 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 get something? Or can she'd give her a little job to do, and my daughter would come back in again. So they're just a couple of tools that are very useful. The push balls you can also use. So I have a game that I play with my dyslexic students. In fact, all my students like it. It's a game that I used to play as a kid. So you're throwing the push ball back and forth to each other, and you say like, "Hey, my name is Anne Marie. My friend's name is Andrew. Whatever, can be a boy or girl. We live in," and have to say a country beginning with A, America, and we sell apples. And you go all the way through the alphabet. It's a great way to teach kids sequence. It's a great way to teach kids the alphabet. And it's also a great way to engage them and to help them to focus. So that's another idea. Any card games that are pattern matching, they're very good for maths. So the idea is any opportunity you can it makes the content visual. So if you're trying to explain how to add or subtract or how to count, make sure you have something concrete. Now, I do have a book on Amazon called How to Teach Your Child Addition in 7 Simple Steps. And there is an updated edition going on sale next week. And it will have how to teach addition and subtraction in 7 simple steps to your child. So it's all about making the information concrete. What else did I want to tell you? Okay, so how can I help you? So actually, I'll show you one more thing. So this is the side, the sort of work I do in my program. So here is one child's version of self. Here is one that I made. And here's me holding my handbag and a book because I love reading. Here is another little girl's version of herself. Here is a little boy's version of himself. I've literally got hundreds of them. Here is a little clock that somebody made during time, and here's the clay arrows. So if you want to know where to get the clay, please get in touch, and we call it clay, but it's actually a type of plasticine. And it's not all created equal. Some is dreadful and dries out continuously. So all the way through all of my programs, maths, the reading, the attention mastery for ADHD, the life concept. They're all done through clay. They're all done through 3D visual methods. So here is my Black Friday offering to you guys. So normally a one-to-one consultation with me is €160. So until the 28th of November, it will be €120. And what happens at the consultation? So at the consultation, I chat with you, I chat with the child, I go through a series of questions to find their strengths, their weaknesses. I share my 20 years knowledge with you about what I found useful, what is not useful. And then based on that, I decide whether the child is a good candidate to work with me, whether I think the method that I use is going to be beneficial to them. And then I see, are they better suited to an intensive program or a longer, slower program, or maybe even a group program. So the consultation, I will assess whether they are dyslexic, dyspraxic, dyscalculic, because sometimes people think, oh, their child's just dyscalculia, and then it turns out, well, it's actually their dyspraxia that's affecting their maths, or it might be their dyslexia that's affecting their maths, or maybe they just missed some, critical information in school. So maybe none of them are at play. So during the program, the maths program in particular, what we do is we teach the children to focus. So these tools are in all of the programs: how to focus, how to relax, how to control our energy dial, practical things like how to use a dictionary and why is that important, because that involves sequence. Mastery of words in clay, mastery of symbols in clay for maths, mastery of all the concepts that I outlined: self, change, consequence, order, disorder, time, and mastery of the trigger words in maths, which are words that are involved in word problems. So they're very, very comprehensive programs and very, very successful, obviously, because I've been doing it for 20 years. And the reason I got into it, I was originally a financial controller, which gives me, an added layer of expertise when it comes to maths. So I changed career to do this work, and I have to say I absolutely love this work, and it's been hugely successful for all of my students. So if anybody needs any referrals or anything, please let me know. So that's all for today. I was going to say folks, because my husband always says folks. That's all for today. Please reach out if you'd like to avail of the offer of a one-to-one consultation. It's money well spent, even if you decide that at this time is not the exact time that you want to take a program up. The consultation alone is gives you great insight into your child. So, or if you're an adult, equally beneficial. So, I will say goodbye now, and I look forward to chatting to you all very soon. Take care, and I hope you found it beneficial.